of having a fleet that is robust, as you put it, speaks of itself. Like, let's face it. I watched a video today about the new group of boarding parties. I think they're called MTOS. And these guys are doing things now that you and I could not have imagined. They're boarding foreign vessels, and these guys are a group of special forces in and of themselves, and they need to be supported. So you can develop ships.
They're MTAG.
MTAG, is that what it is?
Yeah.
MTOG,
or
MTAG.
MTOG, sorry, MTOG. Maritime Tactical Operations Group.
Yeah, and they're kind of like the U.S. Marines. At least in the beginning, that's what the U.S. Marines were born for, was operations at sea, when you needed a soldier, not a sailor. And these guys are all sailors. Anyway, I'm getting off the topic, but the bottom line is having a high-tech industry pays huge dividends when it's one of the things that it does is the spin-offs from the military create jobs that don't necessarily have military uses, but because the technology is flexible and we're always developing it, you can find new uses for it. You've got everything from carbon fiber to a whole bunch of different things that have been developed in labs for military uses that are now used every day in the public domain. And that's a benefit nobody's even talking about. So when I look at government procurement in the Canadian sense, we haven't done it right since World War II. It's been one horrific disaster after another. Everything from the canceling of the Avro Arrow to the riding the Chieftain tank too far, to the steamers that you and I are on, to the F-18 and how long it's been in service and how long it's going to have to keep flying. No matter what it is, we managed to find a way to screw it up. And I am fed up with that. So when I see this story, it's just another example of how we put the interest of others ahead of our men and women at arms. And we can't afford that.
Now, the F-18, just to put the F-18 age into perspective, I was an air cadet when they bought the F-8, when they signed the deal for the F-18. I remember going and watching some of the demonstrations that were put on of the possible aircraft for that contract. I am now in my late 50s. So let's just say that the F-18 has enjoyed a very long and illustrious life in its Canadian service. And it's time to get serious now. We're starting off talking about Navy ships, okay? But here again, it doesn't. We haven't even selected a replacement for the F-18s, Nick. And if today we ink a deal for replacements to the F-18s, we're years away from having that fleet replaced entirely. We're probably years away from having the fleet even starting to be replaced, because you can't just take a shell in Canada. You can't just take a plane off the shelf. There are peculiarities about the Canadian operating environment that require you to have some degree of modification, some degree of changes to the off-the-shelf plane in order to make it serviceable here in Canada and to meet all of our needs, which again are their unique needs. Okay, maybe the Russians come close to what our needs are because of the size of their country, the sparseness of the population, and the climate that they operate in. But the Americans don't come close to us. Frankly, no other country does. So it's really a serious problem, but they can't get their act together. Well, you want a poster boy for this, a poster vehicle for this? It's called the Snowbird. The Snowbird demonstration team has been together since the early 60s. They've been flying these particular set of jets
since the later 60s. I'll say 65, 66, somewhere in there. I'm not sure exactly the date they first flew.
Right, the Tudor. The Tudor.
They call it the Tudor, I think.
Yeah,
the CT
the Tudor, that's
144.
it.
That plane is over 50 years old. How long does an airframe have before it's no longer serviceable? And we've begun to see the cost of maintaining them go up. These are amazing airplanes, amazing pilots, but they deserve a new mount. And if we can't even do that, buy a trainer aircraft. It doesn't have to be an F-18. We're not trying to replicate the Blue Angels. We're trying to keep the snowbirds in the air safely so they can go and do what they do best. And that is dazzle crowds all over the world with the skill of the Canadian pilot. And that kind of thing, if they can't even get that right, how in God's name are they ever going to look after the Navy, the Army, the Air Force with modern, up-to-date equipment so that when we send our men-at-arms into harm's way, we bring back as few body bags as humanly possible?
Amen, brother.
It's enough to make you weep, Joseph.
Sorry, Nick, I'm not in a weeping mood this week because I'm no longer in pain.
You're pain-free. Well, I rejoice with you over that.
I'm tooth-free as well.
But I'm pounding the table psychologically about how poorly we do this.
Yes, I'm sorry, and I'm being facetious, obviously, Nick, but I don't know what the answer is to it. It's, when Donald Trump was running for president in 2016 in the United States, he had a saying, I don't know whether he came up with it or his followers, but it was drain the swamp. The swamp isn't all about corruption. The swamp is about inefficiency,
stagnation,
and stagnation.
Rot.
And there's a lot of that here in Canada as well. There are a lot of good young people in public service, but it's time for a lot of other people to move on. And give us something a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Value for the money that we're paying in taxes. Forget about the money that we're borrowing.
Yeah, you know what? As much as I wish it was different, and AJ is making great points in the comments section. For those of you who are keep an eye on that, have a look at what he has to say. I think he's making some good points, but at the bottom of it all, there seems to be a complete lack of respect for the military in general, and they don't, because it's not their lives riding around in the seat of a 30-year-old tank. It's not them flying around taking on modern Russian MiGs in a 40-year-old airplane. It's not them plowing the waves in a ship whose hull may crack at any moment, like the Athabascan. I mean, that's why it had to be decommissioned, was because the metal fatigue in the hull was so bad they couldn't repair it anymore. That ship was well over 40 years old, almost 50 by the time they finally hung the pennant out and put it to rest. We can't do that. It's not fair. And these people don't care because it's not their butts in the sling.
All right, Nick. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking at the clock. I see that we're coming up to the end of the show. So just want to make one more mention, and that is that if it was up to me, I'd be awarding medals to all of those air crew that flew those Sea Kings for all those years, because boy, oh boy, that took courage. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for joining us. Again, if you join us live, it's Wednesday nights from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on ThinkRadio.ca. If you're listening to the podcast, well, you know how to check us out. Make sure you tell our friends, tell your friends, and then they'll become our friends and family. Okay, so that's it for me, Nick.
All right, in the meantime, we'll see you all again next week. Ubiqueritas et amor, Deus ibi eth. Good evening, God bless, don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.